Okay. Hello and welcome. I'm Laura DeNooyer, and today I'm delighted to share a story with you. This is one that I wrote titled A Week with Mr. Baum. It was published in the Oziana 2021. I don't know if you can see that with the virtual background. It's not quite clear, but
It's a little hard to do that.
I've been in the Oscar for about 4 years, and I'm happy to join in this 50th anniversary celebration of Oziana. So first of all, before I read, I just need to set the scene. You can see this picture behind me. You might recognize this picture based on a well-known photograph of L. Frank Baum sitting on the porch of his cottage in Mcdowell Park on Lake Michigan. With a little computer magic, my daughter adapted that photo and turned it into this colorful little scene. Unfortunately, as a virtual background, my goose head got cut off up there at the top. And I can't figure quite how to get the goose head back on there. But that's the wooden plaque that Baum made, and he dubbed this cottage Sign of the Goose. As you might already know, the Baum family spent numerous summers here in the early 1900s at Mcdowell Park. And the story I'm about to read was actually adapted from a novel that I've been working on with Baum as a character. The novel takes place during the early 1900s and alternating with 1980. And part of the setting is Mcdowell Park. So today's story takes place during 1 week in July in 1904, A Week with Mr. Baum. Monday, July 18, 1904. Lodemia Jane, come here, Mother shouted from the house. Peering from under the sand cherry shrub, 10-year-old Janie squirmed at her mother's harsh tone. She squinted at a leaf cluster. I have to go, Beatrice. Inhaling the lake's breezes, she wiggled a branch. I'll be back soon, Harriet. Those fairies, such a nuisance. But she was delighted they'd accompanied her this week and found this cozy nook. While cozy for her, too big for fairies, they constantly complained. Janie trudged to the rental cottage, a large Victorian home with myriad windows and balconies, turret poking the sky. She fancied herself a princess waving from the highest window. The house perched atop a long stairway leading to the beach. Arms folded, her mother stood guard at the door and tugged her inside. The nerve of you disappearing with chores undone. Wash up and count out 6 eggs. Why chores on vacation? Janie stood at the dry sink, poured water and rubbed in soap. Tiny streams of dirt flowed in the basin, creating interesting patterns. Why, Beatrice, you came. Watch from the shelf. Or, who are you talking to? Mother slammed a pot on the stove, muttering. Useless, in her own world again. Janie wandered, excuse me. Janie wandered to the egg basket on the counter. She stepped on the stool, shutting out thoughtless comments so easily discharged like water from a pitcher. Why was Mother so cranky? Especially on their first visit to Mcdowell Resort on Lake Michigan's shore. Father said the holiday would do them good after his rough year in business. Voices meandered through the window. She peeked out. The neighbors. That friendly-looking man and his sons paused on the boardwalk. She opened the window to listen. Though only there 2 days, she loved the way laughter erupted from their porch. Tracking the egg count while eavesdropping proved difficult. How many eggs? Beatrice, pay attention. Your jokes are distracting. Done yet? Mother whisked by. Stop dawdling. I'm sorry. Sorry indeed. I can't endure this nonsense. Janie counted again. Splat. Lodemia Jane, Mother yelled. That does it. The neighbors' heads jerked her way. Janie ducked. Mother yanked her off the stool. Janie stifled a whimper. I'll clean it up. Little good, that'll do, the way you work. Sweep the porch instead, and, Mother pinched her shoulder, leave your fairy friends here. Not another word about them. Sighing, Janie stepped outside with the broom. Was this how Cinderella felt? Breezes wound through treetops, blue lake winking in the background. Waves rolled to shore in a soothing rhythm. At the top of the stairway to the beach, she spun like Cinderella dancing at the ball, everyone below gazing in wonder. Her glass slippers fit perfectly. She swept. More voices from the neighbor's porch. The lake looks choppy, Maud, the man said. Too soon for reeling in a fish dinner. Looks fine to me, said a boy, perhaps Janie's age. Let's try. You'll have the same problem as yesterday, the mother stated, only this time you'll capsize from the waves. That's what your mother says. Janie visualized the man's sly expression. The real reason is that thumpdoodlums live on the lake's bottom. They're worse than pirates. They'll lure you in. The older boy laughed. We've heard that before. I haven't seen one yet. We're too old for this, the younger boy said. You laugh in doubt, the man replied soberly, but doubters have the most to fear. Why'd everyone else have more fun? Janie dropped the broom and slithered through the shrubbery to a spot where she could glimpse the family. Perfect for Beatrice and Harriet. Aries watched over her shoulder, shedding glimmers of light. Janie compiled twigs, leaves, grass, and maple whirligigs to create an enticing fairy habitat. The man launched into a tale about a forest pixie who visited Old King Cole and Humpty Dumpty. Mesmerized, Janie scooted through the underbrush and surreptitiously stood at the porch railing, chin even with the floorboards. 10 feet away sat the family of 4. The man had a full, bushy mustache and neatly parted brown hair. His eyes gleamed, expressions ranging from wide-eyed surprise to chin-up pomposity. The woman embroidered. 2 older boys listened, ignoring their backgammon board. Under a beam, a wooden oval suspended, a goose silhouette. Letters spelled sign of the goose. Wind rocked the chair near a typewriter, paper flapping in the breeze. Janie's eyes were riveted on the man, his deep voice hypnotic. He ended his story, proclaiming, finally that pixie gathered her courage and tiptoed right up to the porch. He looked at her, smiling with clear gray eyes, head at a jaunty angle. Hello, my dear. Discovered. Her heart thudded. She managed a stiff, hello, sir. Are you the new neighbor, or are you visiting from the forest of Brazil? A neighbor, sir. She eyed the typewriter, sparing herself from his warm gaze. I'm building a fairy cottage here. He leaned her way. You know why Mary Contrary was so contrary, don't you? Though surrounded by beautiful flowers, silver bells, cockle shells, and all. Startled, she glanced at the man's wife, who smiled, dark hair emphasizing merry eyes. No, sir. Oh, but you do. Think about it. Tell me when you figured it out. Nursery rhymes were common at age 4, but no man spoke of such things. Her mother had long ago replaced her picture books with the New England primer. The younger boy piped up, Papa knows how 4 and 20 blackbirds get out of the pie and sing even after baking. That's Harry and Kenneth, the woman said. They're 14 and 13. The older 2, Frank and Robert, are away. The man winked. Join us and bring your architecture. She picked up the twig pile and walked to the top of the porch steps. Want to play old maid? Kenneth asked. Nodding, Janie set the twigs down. They played while the man typed and the woman embroidered. Afterward, she called the boys into the house for chores. Janie retrieved the twigs. Lighting a cigar, the man invited her to the table. Behind him, treetops composed a mosaic of sky blue pieces, green leaves, and filtered sunshine. Did you remember why Mary is so contrary? The fairies, sir. Fairies? Yes, they hide when you want to find them. They bother you when you're not in the mood. They play tricks. You know how fairies are, don't you? Oh, I do. I've had similar frustrations myself, but fairies will be fairies. Janie blinked. Never had anyone engaged her this. He sat beside her. What's your name, child? No, let me guess. With such imagination, your name must be Anna Isabella. No, hadn't he heard her mother's scolding earlier from the boardwalk? Agnes Winifred? Suppressing a giggle, she wrinkled her nose. Oh, no. Angelina? No, but it's lovely. How about Charlotte Rose? No, well, yes, that's it. You guessed it. Well, then, Charlotte Rose, how did you think blackbirds sing after baking in a pie? The king commanded to be served a pie that sang. So the royal baker sprinkled magic powder in with its sugar so the blackbirds wouldn't suffocate. Of course, magic powder works every time. I wonder what the queen thought. Janie twirled a whirligig. She wasn't happy. Birds swooped into her bread and honey, making a huge mess. Such a sight, birds stuck with honey. Feathers popped out all over. It made the queen's nose itch. She sneezed. The man laughed. She'd never heard a jollier sound. He nodded toward the twig pile. Fairy cottage, eh? Not used to such attention, Janie felt flushed. I want Beatrice to come over. She lowered her voice. If I make a nice hiding place, maybe she'll leave the fairy den. I hope it works. Those confounded fairies are more stubborn than goats with teeth sunk into your favorite red shirt. Can't shake them loose no matter what, like some witches I know. Janie stiffened. The witch and Hansel and Gretel? No, dear, a different domain altogether. He added a leaf to the top of her creation. Are the fairies close by? Don't tell if it's a secret. They'll be angry if I do. I know, just like the Munchkins. They grumbled for a long time. Munchkins? From The Wonderful Wizard of Oz? He owned the book, courtesy of Aunt Sophie. So long did they live in the land of Oz without a human soul discovering them, but alas, Dorothy finally did, another fellow before her. You mean the wizard? He nodded. You read it? Yes, I loved it. Do you think Oz is real? If it's not, how could one write about it? He adjusted a twig. Funny thing about Oz, some places are lovely, like here, with rivers, farmlands, and meadows, but other parts are scary, like those mean trees that flung the scarecrow around. Dorothy was brave, she said. No doubt. Fortunately, she had companions, but she had to travel to the Emerald City and beyond before getting home. Gentle wind rippled his hair. We all have places to go, my dear, hard roads to travel, difficult things to learn while growing up. Confused, Janie tilted her head. He fastened his gaze on her. As the good witch from the north says, you must walk. It is a long journey through a country that is sometimes pleasant and sometimes dark and terrible. Her stomach prickled. His tone suggested something different than Dorothy's journey, as if he'd glimpsed her very soul. What do you mean, sir? I mean, like Dorothy, everybody's on a journey through life, trying to find the things most important to them. Don't give up, no matter how difficult. He reached toward her. She drew back, expecting the usual slap from an adult, but he set a gentle hand on her arm. Charlotte Rose, you've plenty of courage. As the wizard told the cowardly lion, all you need is confidence in yourself. True courage is facing danger when you're afraid, and that kind you have in plenty. Which danger? Running in the lake? Or fear of the dark? Or being yelled at? Voice buoyant, he picked up a twig. Whether sticks become sawhorses or grass becomes a lion's mane, whether dandelions become a fairy's cap or a feather duster, whether trees are kind and generous or cruel and persnickety, you needn't fear what others think of you. The moment stretched across the shady porch, sunlight teasing its edges. It reached the shimmering lake, a moment caught in time, bound to her like an anchor to a boat. He gestured toward the water. No hot air balloons today. Kenneth trekked onto the porch. Papa, let's swim. Ah, my kitty winkles. He grinned. I must go, but come back tomorrow at 2. We'll climb Old Baldhead, the dune. On the incline railway? No, the boys want to climb it themselves. Will you join us? Her stomach fluttered like a blossoming flower, petals tickling. I'd love to if Mother allows. We'll stop by and ask. Such a pleasure talking with you, Charlotte Rose. Burdened by the charade, Janie looked down. My name is really Laudemia Jane. He cupped her chin. I know. That gives you the distinction of being one of a kind. But to me, you're just as much Charlotte Rose. It's all in how you see yourself. During these last 15 minutes as Charlotte Rose, building a fairy house together and talking about Oz, she saw herself as lovable. The man chuckled. I too have a confession. I was christened after my Uncle Lyman, a fine fellow to be sure, but with a name I cannot endure. So I use my middle name. What do I call you, sir? Mr. Baum, my dear. I'm Mr. L. Frank Baum. Tuesday. The next morning, thrilled about Mr. Baum's invitation, Janie couldn't get Oz out of her head. Had she really met the author? Janie accompanied her mother to the market, following boardwalks through maples, oaks, and cottonwoods. Her clunky black shoes turned silver like Dorothy's. Wooden plank paths became a road of yellow brick. The buzz of cicadas emerged into munchkin chatter. Bushes swirled with jewel-winged damselflies and dragonflies, shining as brilliantly as yellow, winky country. Stop lollygagging, Mother snapped. The walkways of Lover's Lane, the Sawbuck Trail, and Mishawaka Avenue wound through clumps of huge, half-hidden cottages in a forest that crept uphill toward the sky. Did flying monkeys wake among the trees? Janie planted herself on the log fence, swinging her feet as she swept up the new view. Down Wakazoo Trail stood several houses. One wore a wraparound porch, another peaked a crow's nest with a crow's nest. The munchkin lad Bach might step out momentarily. Would the next house resemble dome-shaped Ozian dwellings? Step it up, time's a-wasting. Why was Mother always so cross? After market, Janie had a tea party with her dolls under the cherry bush. Stuffed with imaginary pistachio cupcakes and gooseberry tea, she carried a stack of china teacups to the kitchen. She must return them before Mother noticed. A sonorous voice drifted from the front door. Welcome to paradise, Mrs. Broderick. Janie squeezed the cups. They're Baum. She peeked around the corner to see him and his wife talking to Mother. I apologize for Sandra's on the boardwalk, he said, but despite a few annoyances, you'll find no better summer haven in the world. Will your family be here for the regatta? No, just this week. Please come in. Mr. and Mrs. Baum walked inside. She handed Mother a plate. Fresh muffins made this morning. Pay no mind to my husband's perpetual ramblings about the resort's state of affairs. Perpetual ramblings? He emitted a hearty laugh. Maud, don't exaggerate so. Look who's talking about exaggeration, Mrs. Baum said. Janie stepped into the kitchen doorway, hoping they'd see her. Mr. Baum cleared his throat. We're wondering if your Charlotte Rose may join us climbing the dune today. Janie gulped, frozen. She'd never dare tell Mother she'd introduced herself as Charlotte Rose. We've no Charlotte Rose here. Mother crossed her arms. Janie's face grew hot. Mrs. Baum smirked. There you go, mixing up fantasy and reality again. He shook his head. Ah, yes, as sweet and lovely as a Charlotte Rose. Laudemia Jane, that's it. You met Laudemia Jane? Mother's voice was incredulous. We had a lovely chat on the porch. Janie cringed. Don't mention fairies and witches. Mother would be furious. May she join our family for a dune excursion? Mrs. Baum asked. Well, I suppose. Mother turned toward the kitchen doorway where Janie stood. Janie stumbled, dropping the teacups. They shattered. She bent to pick up the pieces. You broke my good china, Mother barked. Wasn't Mother going to say Mr. Baum asked for her? I'm sorry, Janie stifled a whimper. Get the broom. You're nothing but trouble. Trembling, Janie fetched the broom. Upon her return, Mr. Baum nabbed it. Allow me. He swept porcelain chunks into the dustpan. I traveled as a China salesman many years. I broke 5,287 cups and plates. Accidentally, of course. Mother tried to grab the broom. Mr. Baum, no need to clean my daughter's mess. No use arguing when his mind's set, Mrs. Baum said cheerfully. He swept more, singing Polly Wolly Doodle in a rich baritone voice. He dumped the pieces in the wastebasket. Now then, amusement lit his face. He bowed gallantly as if on stage. Miss Charlotte Rose, how do you do? She looked back and forth between grinning Mr. Baum and her scowling mother, and curtsied like Cinderella. Charming to see you, sir. I'm well. And you? He chortled. May she join us? Pursing her lips, Mother nodded, probably anticipating a peaceful day. Janie ran upstairs to her bedroom and snatched the wonderful Wizard of Oz. She stuffed it into her satchel. Back downstairs, Mother tied Janie's hat ribbon snugly at her neck. Don't get sunburned. As Janie and the Baums walked to their cottage, Mr. Baum sang, Oh, Susanna. Mrs. Baum and Janie joined in. The breeze carried his cigar scent. On their porch, Janie handed him her book. Mr. Baum, will you sign this? Certainly. He dipped the pen. The boys plopped onto the porch. How old are you? Harry asked. 10. Harry sniggered and punched Kenneth. Told you. Boys, mind your manners. Mrs. Baum set a firm hand on Harry's shoulder. He thinks he's always right, Kenneth pouted. Pale cheeks, the epitome of feigned innocence, as if he well knew how to play the younger brother role. What did you guess? Janie asked, charmed by banter over predicting her age. I said you were 10, Harry replied, but Ken said you were 11. Janie smiled coyly. Then maybe I'm really 11. They all laughed, Mr. Baum the loudest. Mr. Baum, Janie asked, where'd you get your ideas for Oz and the Emerald City? Well, my dear, I consider Oz a place I discovered rather than invented. Ever hear of the White City, Charlotte? Harry asked. Bright with 1,000,000 electric lights. Imagine putting on green glasses there, Kenneth added. Everything looks green. Oz looks like the White City? Unable to attend the current St. Louis World's Fair, her parents often discussed the 1893 Columbian exhibition. Ideas come from many sources, Mr. Baum said. I've sold China, witnessed cyclones in Dakota Territory, observed hot air balloons over Lake Michigan. Many events found a home in Dorothy's Experience. Will Dorothy return to Oz? Janie asked. If so, the Ozians might not tell me. They tend to keep to themselves. Instead, I created a stage experience for her, an Oz musical extravaganza with another one in the works. Janie wanted to ask more, but Mr. Baum said, time to go. On the boardwalk, Kenneth toted a box-shaped camera, snapping pictures every few steps. Mr. Baum carried an accordion-style Kodak. The Kodak is science and magic combined, Kenneth announced with fervor. Best combination ever. One's as valid as the other, Mr. Baum said. His camera is the Kodak Brownie No. 2, named after those rascally little brownies Mr. Cox is so fond of drawing. Because it photographs them, Janie asked. Nobody caught fairies in pictures. Mr. Baum's mustache twitched. Possibly, but we've not succeeded. Point if you see any. I'll take a snapshot. At Mcdowell Harbor on Black Lake, they headed toward the dune. The incline railway, Angel's Flight, squeaked as it carried riders to the top. Down the shore rose a ruckus from Denison Electric Park, cheering baseball fans, screeching children, rumbling roller coaster, clinking merry-go-round gears, and shooting gallery bangs. They flung shoes and stockings on the sand. Traversing the steep incline, Janie bounded behind the boys. Her feet sunk into the grains, a luxurious indulgence. Sand stretched all around like the desert surrounding Oz. She plodded every step ashore. On top, she sucked in the breeze and squinted at squawking gulls, sunlight on wings against a backdrop of cerulean blue white sky and water. From Lookout Pavilion, Lake Michigan on her left stretched like taffy to the horizon. On her right, Mcdowell Hotel and the amusement park lined Black Lake South Shore. Mount Pisgah Dune dwarfed Hotel Ottawa on the north. Let's take a picture. Mr. Baum waved toward a clump of tall grasses. The boys charged over while Janie stood on tiptoe to see the Kodak. He pointed out features, letting her touch buttons. Her father never bent to her level or let her touch valuable object. Peering through the viewfinder, she watched the brothers make silly faces. Kenneth hopped on Harry's back. Mr. Baum winked. Go with the boys. Janie trotted over. Her hat slid off, hanging by ribbons. He yelled, Sharks and tadpoles. They posed with broad smiles. Harry pinched Kenneth as Kenneth slapped his hand away. Breezes whipped Janie's hair. The boys bounced down the dune, leaving Janie behind. Dizzy from the height, she froze. Her stomach lurched. Such a long way down. Mr. Baum walked over and patted her shoulder. You've more courage than you think. Heart pounding, Janie relished the scene once more, then jumped as free as an eagle, arms out like wings. Back at the Baum's cottage, the boys charged down the steps to the beach without stopping inside to change. They plunged into the water. Come on, Charlotte, Harry shouted. Water's warm. Janie looked at Mrs. Baum. I've never swum in Lake Michigan before. It's a superior experience. Go ahead, dear. They walked down. Mrs. Baum held Janie's hat and pinafore while the boys scuffled in the water. Janie dipped her toes in. Cold tingled her feet. Waves slapped her legs. She stepped farther, dress ballooning around her thighs. Kenneth splashed her. She splashed back. The game was on. An hour later, they dried on the beach. Kenneth flopped by Janie in the sand. Look, Harry pointed up. A hot air balloon floated over the lake. Janie let her mind fly with it. Mr. Baum had said his life experience wove into his stories. Balloons, China, cyclones. What experiences did she have, besides doing chores, reading, having tea parties with bells and fairies? Now she'd climbed a dune with new friends and played in Lake Michigan till waterlogged. Janie waved to the balloonist. Harry and Kenneth jumped up and down as if stranded, yelling to be rescued. She finally joined in. If her parents saw, they'd yank her home to administer a sound thrashing for such unruly behavior. Later on the Baum's porch, Janie picked up the satchel with her Oz book. Mr. Baum sat at the typewriter. Return tomorrow morning at 10 for a magical venture into bookmaking. Bookmaking? Walking home, Janie carried her hat, pinafore, stockings, and shoes. She'd better sneak upstairs to clean up before Mother saw her wet clothes. But Mother met her at the door. She glared at the sandy puddle under Janie, as if sand were as ruthless an invader as robbers. Did you swim in your clothes? The blooming flower in her stomach wilted. Waves that had refreshed drowned her. Well, I never. Mother grabbed the pinafore and hat. Why are these off? Mother dragged her to the tin tub and back. Your face is sunburned. Your dress is torn. Your sleeves are filthy. Do you know how hard it is to get sand out? Mother scrubbing ground sand into her skin. Not one grain better get into my house. And who in the world is Charlotte Rose? Janie hunkered down in the tub. Answer me, what is this Charlotte Rose business about? I told him that's my name. Mother slapped her. You lied, you wicked girl. Cheeks stinging, Janie bowed her head over scrunched up knees, hands behind her neck, as if taking cover in a cyclone. Mother pulled her hair, damning snarls. To think what I go through teaching you manners and morals. Then you think us by lying to the neighbors. You make a fool of me every day. Shaking, Janie closed her eyes in shame. She gritted her teeth to keep cries from escaping. Mother wrapped her with a sheet from the clothesline and smacked her bottom. Go to your room. No supper tonight. Janie snagged the satchel and ran into the house, like Cinderella running from the ball, her beautiful gown in rags, her lovely day abandoned like a glass slipper. She'd be doomed to housework, like Dorothy, too, stuck in the Wicked Witch's castle. In her room, rolled in the sheet, Janie read Mr. Baum's inscription. To my dear friend, Charlotte Rose, may you ever dwell in the Oz of your own imagination. Ozily, L. Frank Baum. Touching the dried ink, she smiled and leaned back, arms and legs remembering the feel of sand and waves. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Her mother threw open the door. Aren't you dressed yet? She pulled a frock from the closet and tossed it her way. Trembling, Janie drew up her knees, set over the book trapped between her thighs and chest. Mother pulled the sheet and seized the book. Please leave it here. Fighting tears, Janie reached. These books are the devil's fodder. She picked up more fairy tales, slapping one on top of the other. Don't count on these. Don't count on more from Aunt Sophie. Arms full, she dashed out. No, Janie screamed and jumped out of bed. She raced to the door as it slammed in her face. Bawling, she threw on a dress and ran downstairs. Give me my books! The books perched on top of the dining room hutch, out of reach. Janie, her father called from the parlor that evening, his voice like Lake Michigan waves churning. Come down here. Gripping the railing, Janie headed to the parlor. Laudemia Jane, this time like storm-infested waves. She peeked around the corner. I'm here. A fire crackled in the hearth. Why? Flushed, her mother held the wonderful Wizard of Oz on her lap. I've never been so appalled in my life. Here we are on vacation, and you haven't given us a moment's respite. Her father's voice was calm but foreboding. Your mother and I are concerned about your propensity to lie and your attraction to stories based on falsehoods. Janie glanced at the Oz book. What do you mean? First, you tell a stranger your name is Charlotte Rose. Secondly, you're filling your mind with senseless tales that tempt you to prevaricate even more. Stories of made-up lands and creatures that don't exist, perverting the mind until you don't know right from wrong. Tension jerked each muscle. Do you think I built successful businesses by telling lies? How far would I get if I fibbed about the cost of labor for ice removal? What if your mother introduced herself as Jenny Lind to our customers? Janie squirmed under her father's austere scrutiny. Furthermore, there's another abomination. Mother lifted the Oz book. This story makes no distinction between good and evil, with both bad and good witches. But there's no such thing as a good witch. But the good witch uses her powers for good, Janie said. See, you're deluded. All witchcraft is evil, opposed to God, clearly stated in scripture. It's pretend, Janie said, a story made up for fun. That's the problem, Father said. This story fills your head with delusions. We won't tolerate it, nor will we tolerate your spending time with the Baums. There's only one destiny for this book, Mother stood. The same end as all witchcraft. Janie now knew why the fire burned in July. No! Mother walked to the hearth. Janie lunged to snatch the book. Mother pushed her away. She ripped out pages and tossed them to the hungry fire, flames leaping with each morsel. No! Janie screamed, charging forward. No! The scarecrow sizzled, calling for water. Smoke encircled the Tin Woodman. Flames singed the lion's mane. Janie reached. Toto! Dorothy! Father grasped Janie, holding her arms in place as she pleaded, trying to escape. Mother ripped out page after page, each one curling, blackening, disintegrating to ashes. She tossed the rest of the book in all at once. The fire swallowed it whole. I'm going to take a break there. Join me next time for the rest of 1 week with Mr. Baum.
We will read part 2, and next week you will hear part 2 of Laura DeNooyer's story about a day, a week with Mr. Baum. Thank you.